So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was a retired god who decided to help the Goblin Slayer. Naruto x Sword Maiden x Guild Girl Goblin Slayer. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. The Fallen Star. The midnight sky fractu. Red as a streak of golden light plummeted earthward, trailing celestial fire across the firmament. No ordinary meteor, the descending light pulsed with consciousness and intent, its trajectory deliberate rather than random. For a breathless moment, it hung suspended above an ancient forest before plunging through the canopy, impact sending a soundless wave of energy rippling outward for miles in every direction. Where the light struck, a perfect circle of grass transformed, not scorched as one might expect, but rather rejuvenated, each blade shimmering with unnatural vitality, flowers blooming. Out of season in a perfect ring around a single prone figure. Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes to a world he had only ever observed from above. For millennia, he had watched this realm as a deity of protection and renewal. Answering prayers when cosmic law permitted, observing mortal struggles with divine detachment. Now, as sensation flooded his newly limited form, he experienced the world's raw immediacy, the cool dampness of dew-touched grass against his skin, the symphony of night insects humming their ancient songs, the dizzying expanse of stars overhead appearing suddenly distant and small. So this is what it feels like, he murmured, voice raspy from disuse. To be mostly mortal. Within him, something ancient stirred. Not the wisest decision you've made in our centuries together, Kit. Kurama's voice resonated not through the air but directly within Naruto's consciousness, a telepathic bond forged through eons of shared existence. Once a feared chakra beast, the nine-tailed fox had evolved alongside Naruto through godhood into something between conscience, advisor, and eternal companion. Wisdom isn't why I chose this path, Naruto replied, slowly sitting upright and examining his hands in the moonlight. They appeared ordinary enough. Tanned skin, calloused palms, yet occasionally translucent golden energy flickered beneath the surface like lightning through storm clouds. After 50,000 years of watching from above, I need to remember what it means to live among them. You've retained more power than you intended, Kurama observed. The transformation was imperfect. Naruto nodded, rising to his feet with fluid grace that belied his newly mortal form. The council wouldn't permit complete divestment. Said it would destabilize the cosmic hierarchy. He wore simple garments that had materialized during his descent. Sturdy dark trousers, a long-sleeved shirt of undyed linen, and a sleeveless tunic in burnished orange that caught the moonlight like captured flame. Around his neck hung a crystal pendant, seemingly ordinary except for the miniature spiraling galaxy suspended within its depths. Last chance to reconsider before your divine essence fully settles into this form, Kurama offered, his mental tone revealing skepticism rather than genuine hope for reversal. Naruto smiled, stretching unfamiliar muscles as he oriented himself. Not a chance. I've made my decision. He touched the crystal at his throat, his last divine artifact, capable of storing portions of his relinquished power. Besides, I'm not completely helpless. Closing his eyes, Naruto extended his senses outward, feeling the pulse of life surrounding him. The process was frustratingly muted compared to his former omniscience, but sufficient to detect the nearest settlement. A modestly sized town several miles northeast, nestled between forest and rolling farmland. That way, he murmured, setting off through the moonlit forest with purposeful strides. The transition from immortal to mostly mortal manifested in unexpected ways during his journey. His breath actually mattered now, coming faster when he exerted himself. The night air felt genuinely cool against his skin rather than merely registering as data. When his bare foot landed on a sharp stone, the pain was immediate and authentic, causing him to wince. I'd forgotten what pain feels like, he whispered, examining the small cut with fascination rather than displeasure. You've chosen an unfortunate time for this experiment, Kurama commented as they traveled. Something stirs in the spaces between realms. I sense disturbances. All the more reason to be here, Naruto replied, pausing atop a hill that offered a view of distant lights, the town he'd sensed earlier. If something threatens this world, I want to face it alongside those who have the most to lose. Dawn painted the eastern horizon by the time Naruto reached the outskirts of the settlement. Farm Country Town appeared exactly as its unimaginative name suggested, an agricultural community surrounded by meticulously tended fields, awakening to another day of honest labor. Farmers already worked their lands, women gathered at the communal well, and children chased one another through narrow streets still damp with morning dew. No one paid particular attention to the stranger entering their midst, assuming him another traveler seeking work or shelter. This suited Naruto perfectly. He wanted to observe unnoticed before establishing himself. The town boasted a modest market square, several craftsmen's workshops, and, most significantly to Naruto's purposes, a small adventurers' guild outpost. Though far from the sprawling headquarters found in larger cities, this branch office served the surrounding region, connecting local problems with those skilled enough to solve them. Naruto approached the simple stone building, noting the worn wooden board outside covered with pinned notices. Most requested: assistance with mundane matters, escorts for merchants, culling troublesome wildlife, retrieving lost items. But one posting, marked with red ink and stamped with urgency, caught his attention. Gensi. Goblin scout parties observed near eastern farms. Suspected nest location unknown. Immediate investigation required. Reward increased after third attack. Asterisk. The parchment bore the distinctive RKS of having been reposted multiple times with increasing reward amounts, suggesting the problem remained unsolved despite escalating incentives. Goblins. Asterisk. Kurama scoffed. You abandon godhood to hunt vermin. Even vermin can devastate lives, Naruto murmured, studying the notice carefully. Besides, we both know seemingly insignificant creatures often signal greater disturbances. He pushed open the guild's wooden door, entering a space that smelled of parchment, leather, and the distinct metallic scent of adventurers' equipment. Despite the early hour, several individuals already occupied the main room, a brawny warrior haggling over a completed quest's payment, a pair of rogues examining a map in the corner, and a nervous-looking young man clutching a recruit's form with white-knuckled intensity. Behind the long counter stood a young woman whose appearance belied her composure. The guild girl, as her position was commonly known, efficiently managed multiple conversations while organizing papers. Her chestnut hair falling in soft waves around a face that combined professional detachment with genuine concern for those she assisted. She glanced up as Naruto approached, why-colored eyes registering mild surprise at the unusual newcomer. Good morning, she greeted, setting aside her quill. Welcome to Farm Country Town's Adventurers Guild. Are you looking to register or inquire about available quests? Naruto smiled, the expression transforming his face from merely handsome to genuinely captivating, a remnant of divine charisma he couldn't fully suppress. Registration first, if possible. The quest board outside mentioned goblin sightings that interest me. The guild girl's professional expression flickered momentarily with genuine concern. You're interested in the goblin quest? Alone. Her gaze assessed him with newfound intensity, noting his lack of visible weapons or armor. That's currently rated for a silver-ranked party at minimum. We've lost 3 rookies who attempted it independently. I understand the concerns, Naruto replied, his tone neither dismissive nor boastful. I have experience with similar threats. I'd be happy to demonstrate my capabilities if necessary. She studied him for a moment longer before producing a series of parchments from beneath the counter. Very well. Complete these forms, but I'll need to evaluate your skills before approving a goblin-related quest for a new registrant. Her tone softened slightly. It's not bureaucracy, it's to prevent more unnecessary deaths. A wise policy, Naruto agreed, accepting the documents and a proffered quill. As he began filling the forms with deliberately vague information about his origins, the guild's door swung open with enough force to draw every eye in the room. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations halted, backs straightened, and several adventurers subtly created distance between themselves and the newcomer. The figure who entered moved with methodical precision, every step purposeful beneath armor that had clearly weathered countless battles. A simple sword hung at his side, and a small round shield was strapped to his arm, both well maintained but utterly unremarkable. What distinguished him was the helmet, a full face covering that never lifted, even indoors, constructed to resemble the visage of some ancient warrior. Goblin Slayer, the guild girl acknowledged, her professional tone warming with familiarity. Welcome back. Successful hunt. The helmeted figure nodded once, placing a small sack on the counter that leaked suspicious dark fluid. 5 goblin scouts eliminated 3 miles east of town. Evidence of larger nest activities. Tracks suggest multiple raiding parties. His voice emerged metallic and emotionless through the helmet's confines. That confirms our worst fears, she replied, pushing aside Naruto's unfinished registration. Farmer Tarek reported missing livestock yesterday, and the Eastern Border Patrol hasn't returned. Naruto observed the exchange with intense interest, particularly noting how the room's occupants reacted to this goblin slayer, a mixture of respect, unease, and in some cases, barely concealed disdain. More fascinating was the man himself, whose obsessive focus radiated from him like heat from a forge. His soul bears scars deeper than his armor, Kurama observed. Something fractured him long ago. Naruto nodded imperceptibly, recognizing in the armored figure a single-minded determination he understood intimately. During his divine tenure, he had observed many souls driven by purpose. But few burned with such focused intensity. The guild girl noticed Naruto's attention and made a quick decision. Goblin Slayer, this adventurer has expressed interest in the Eastern Goblin situation. He's new to our guild but claims experience with similar threats. The helmet turned toward Naruto with mechanical precision, revealing nothing of the face behind it. For a long moment, the Goblin Slayer assessed the newcomer in silence, his scrutiny almost palpable despite the helmet's concealment. Experience with goblins, he finally asked, voice betraying the faintest hint of skepticism. Not goblins specifically, Naruto admitted honestly. But I've faced many creatures that prey on the vulnerable. I understand tactical assessment, nest clearance, and the importance of leaving no survivors when dealing with reproducing threats. The precision of his language, deliberately chosen to align with what Naruto had already intuited about Goblin Slayer's methodologies, earned him another long. Evaluating silence. Equipment. Goblin Slayer eventually asked. Naruto spread his empty hands. I work primarily unarmed, though I can adapt to available resources. My methods are unconventional but effective. This earned a dismissive helmet tilt that spoke volumes about Goblin Slayer's opinion of unconventional methods against his chosen enemy. Goblins require specific countermeasures, he stated flatly. They see in darkness. They breed rapidly with captured women. They learn from survivors. They use poison in numbers. Unconventional methods get people killed. I understand, Naruto responded, neither challenging nor backing down. Perhaps I could observe your techniques firsthand. The quest mentioned investigation rather than direct engagement. An extra set of eyes might prove useful, even if my methods differ from yours. The guild girl intervened before Goblin Slayer could respond. Actually, that might be ideal. We need information about this nest's size and location before mounting a proper response. A reconnaissance partnership would allow for knowledge transfer while gathering critical intelligence. She turned to Goblin Slayer. You've mentioned before that most adventurers lack proper goblin hunting education. A calculated appeal to the armored man's unspoken mission to spread awareness about his enemy's true threat level. After a moment's consideration, he nodded once. Acceptable. Dawn tomorrow. Eastern Gate. Bring water, rope, and something to mask your scent. Wear nothing that makes noise. With that pronouncement, he collected his payment for the scouts and departed as abruptly as he had arrived. The guild girl released a small sigh once he'd gone. He's singularly focused, she explained, returning to Naruto's registration. But there's no one more knowledgeable about goblins or more reliable in eliminating them. I sensed as much, Naruto replied, completing the final form with a flourish. His dedication speaks for itself. She accepted the documents, reviewing them with professional efficiency despite her obvious curiosity about the unusual newcomer. Naruto Uzumaki, unusual name for these regions. And your origin is listed simply as, far north. Very far, he confirmed with a smile that invited no further questions. Well, Mr. Uzumaki, given your arrangement with Goblin Slayer, I'll provisionally register you as porcelain rank. After your reconnaissance mission, we can reassess based on performance. She stamped the documents and produced a simple porcelain tag, the marker of novice adventurers in this world's guild system. Thank you. Naruto paused, realizing he didn't know her name beyond her professional designation. Isabel, she offered after a moment's hesitation. The personal disclosure a small breach of guild professionalism that surprised even her. Though most simply call me guild girl. Thank you, Isabel, he replied, accepting both the tag and the implied gesture of goodwill it represented. I look forward to proving myself useful. As he turned to leave, she called after him, the sleeping dragon inn down the street offers reasonable rates for adventurers. Tell them the guild sent you. A pause, then with genuine concern, and Mr. Uzumaki, despite your confidence, please take Goblin Slayer's warnings seriously. Goblins have claimed more adventurers than most care to admit. Quote, Naruto nodded, acknowledging her concern with appropriate gravity. I never underestimate any enemy, no matter how small they might seem. The sleeping dragon proved exactly as advertised. Modest but clean accommodations above a lively tavern frequented by locals and travelers alike. Naruto secured a simple room with the small advance the guild provided new registrants. Then spent the remainder of the day familiarizing himself with the town and its surroundings. By evening, he had walked every street, noted each entrance and exit, identified defensive weaknesses in the town's layout, and mentally cataloged the surrounding terrain's tactical advantages. Old habits from divine oversight of battlefields persisted even in his new form, the strat. EGIC assessment automatic rather than conscious. As darkness fell, he returned to the tavern below his rented room, selecting a corner table that offered clear sightlines to all entrances while remaining partially shadowed. A serving girl quickly brought the simple stew and bread he ordered, along with a mug of local ale that he approached with cautious curiosity. First time with our brew? The serving girl asked, noticing his experimental sip. First time with any brew, Naruto admitted honestly, surprised by the bitter complexity flooding his mortal taste buds. She laughed, assuming he joked. Well, pace yourself. Old Talbert's ale has knocked down stronger men than you. With a friendly wink, she moved to serve other patrons. Naruto savored each bite of the simple meal with unexpected pleasure. As a god, he had never needed sustenance. As a mortal, he discovered the profound satisfaction of hunger satisfied. The tavern's ambient noise, conversations, laughter, occasional arguments, washed over him like music. Each interaction a reminder of why he had chosen this path. You're disturbingly content for someone who sacrificed near omnipotence for the privilege of eating peasant stew, Kurama observed dryly. The stew is excellent, Naruto replied internally, breaking off another piece of bread. Besides, omnipotence was always an illusion. Even gods have constraints. His contemplation was interrupted when the tavern's atmosphere shifted subtly. Conversations quieted momentarily before resuming with forced casualness as the now familiar armored figure of Goblin Slayer entered. The man's purpose evidently extended beyond his singular mission, as he carried a small bundle of supplies that suggested routine provisioning rather than monster hunting. Naruto observed with interest as Goblin Slayer approached the counter, conducting his business with minimal words. The tavern keeper clearly knew him well enough to anticipate his needs, preparing a package without requiring specifications. Most fascinating was how others reacted to his presence, the careful distance maintained, the mixture of respect and discomfort, the occasional whispered comment. When Goblin Slayer turned to leave, his helmet paused, orienting toward Naruto's corner. After a moment's consideration, he adjusted his course, approaching the table with the same methodical precision that characterized all his movements. You're prepared for tomorrow? He asked without preamble, standing rather than sitting despite Naruto's welcoming gesture toward the empty chair. I've acquired the items you specified, Naruto confirmed, indicating a small pack beside him, and familiarized myself with the surrounding terrain. Goblin Slayer nodded once. Good. Goblins have changed their patterns recently. More organized, more strategic. It's unusual. A rare volunteering of information that suggested genuine concern. Changed how, exactly? Naruto asked, leaning forward with interest. Previously attacked isolated farms, small groups, now coordinating larger raids, targeting specific resources, taking prisoners deliberately rather than opportunistically. The helmet tilted slightly. Someone or something is directing them. Naruto considered this information carefully. that aligns with patterns observed in other creatures when influenced by outside forces. Natural predators don't change established behaviors without significant pressure or guidance. This earned him another evaluating silence before Goblin Slayer responded, "You notice patterns. Good. Most don't bother understanding goblins before trying to kill them. Understanding one's enemy is the foundation of effective strategy," Naruto replied. "The principle is true for Mortal Kombat as it had been for divine interventions across millennia." Another nod, this one containing the faintest suggestion of approval. Dawn. Eastern Gate. With that, Goblin Slayer departed, leaving behind whispers and sidelong glances from the tavern's other occupants. A different server approached shortly after, this one older with eyes that had witnessed much during her years tending bar. "Careful with that one," she advised, refilling Naruto's mug unasked. Goblin Slayer's reliable for certain jobs, but those who ride alongside him often find more trouble than they bargained for. "You sound concerned," Naruto observed with a gentle smile. "Town's lost enough good people to those little green monsters," she replied, wiping the table absently. "Don't need to lose more because of his obsession with hunting every last one of them." "You don't share his conviction about their threat." The woman sighed, glancing toward the door where Goblin Slayer had disappeared. "I've lived here 62 years. Goblins have always been a problem. But a manageable one until recently. Last 3 months, they've changed. Bolder, smarter, more vicious. 8 people taken from our town alone." Her weathered face hardened. Maybe his obsession was right all along. Quote. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. 3 months of escalating attacks. Has anything else unusual occurred during that time frame? Now that you mention it, she said, lowering her voice. The night the troubles started, many saw a golden star fall beyond the eastern forest. Old beliefs say falling stars herald change, not always for the better. Naruto careful. Why maintained his neutral expression despite the significant revelation. His arrival had coincided precisely with the goblin behavior changes, suggesting a connection he couldn't ignore. "Interesting coincidence," he murmured, finishing his ale. "Nothing's coincidence according to Grandmother Aerith," the server replied with a half-serious smile. "She claims the old gods are stirring again after centuries of silence." With a friendly nod, she moved on to other patrons, unaware of how her casual comment had struck its target. Naruto remained at his table long after finishing his meal, contemplating the implications of what he'd learned. "The timing is suspicious," Kurama acknowledged. "Your arrival may have triggered something dormant, or perhaps something followed your descent." "Either possibility concerns me," Naruto replied mentally. "If my presence endangers these people, I bear responsibility for protecting them." He returned to his room later that evening, but sleep, a November L experience for his newly mortal form, proved elusive. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the rough wooden floor, closing his eyes to meditate as he had countless times during his divine existence. Within his mindscape, Kurama manifested in minimized form, still impressive at the size of a large horse rather than his true mountain-spanning proportions. The 9-tailed fox regarded his host with ansy eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. "Your divine essence hasn't fully integrated with this mortal form," Kurama observed, tails swishing thoughtfully. "You retain more power than anticipated. But it's unstable, flickering rather than flowing." Naruto nodded, examining the golden energy that still coursed through his spiritual representation. The council warned the transition would be imperfect. Divine essence resists complete mortality. "It may prove beneficial given what we've learned," Kurama noted. "If something indeed followed your descent or awakened because of it, you'll need more than mortal capabilities to confront it." "I didn't abandon godhood to reclaim it at the first sign of trouble," Naruto countered, though without heat. "This form, with its limitations and vulnerabilities, connects me to this world in ways divinity never could. I won't surrender that lightly." Kurama's expression shifted to one Naruto recognized from millennia of partnership, resignation mixed with grudging respect. "Stubborn as always, Kit. Some things transcend even godhood." Naruto smiled at the familiar dynamic before refocusing. "Tomorrow we investigate these goblin activities. If my arrival truly catalyzed these changes, I need to understand how and why." With that resolution, he opened his eyes to the moonlit room, feeling more centered despite the unanswered questions. Sleep eventually came, bringing with it another novel experience, dreams, vivid and chaotic in ways omniscient beings never experienced, fragments of mortal consciousness processing the day's events through symbolic imagery. Dawn painted the eastern horizon with delicate brushstrokes of crimson and gold when Naruto arrived at the designated meeting place. The town's eastern gate stood partially open to allow early farmers passage, dew still glistening on surrounding fields as birds announced the day's arrival with enthusiastic chorus. Goblin Slayer already waited, his armor dull in the early light. A small pack secured at his side. He acknowledged Naruto with a minimal nod before immediately addressing practicalities. We follow the eastern stream for 4 miles. Recent tracks suggest Goblin scouts use it for navigation. Speak only when necessary. Stay downwind. Watch for traps. His clipped instructions contained no wasted words, each statement essential for survival. Understood. Naruto replied simply, adjusting his own small pack. They set out immediately, moving in silence across farmland that gradually gave way to scattered copses and eventually denser woodland that dominated the eastern landscape. Goblin Slayer set a pace that would challenge most men, yet Naruto matched it effortlessly, his movements fluid and soundless despite the unfamiliar terrain. The stream they followed carved a serpentine path through the forest, occasionally opening into small clearings before diving back into dense undergrowth. Goblin Slayer paused frequent Why to examine subtle signs invisible to untrained eyes, broken twigs, disturbed pebbles, occasional footprints in muddy banks. 2 scouting parties passed here, he eventually murmured, crouching to examine marks on a fallen log. One returning to nest, one heading toward town. Different times. Organized reconnaissance. Naruto nodded, impressed by the detailed information the man extracted from minimal evidence. The returning party carried something heavy, he added, indicating nearly imperceptible drag marks in the soft earth nearby. Too consistent for random forage. Goblin Slayer's Met turned toward him with renewed assessment. Good observation. They continued deeper into the forest, the terrain gradually shifting as the stream cut through increasingly rocky landscape. By mid-morning, they'd entered a region of limestone formations where water had carved natural passages through soft stone over centuries. Ideal goblin territory, Goblin Slayer noted, voice lowered further. Natural caves, multiple exits, difficult for large parties to navigate, easy to defend. Naruto extended his senses beyond normal mortal capacity, allowing a fraction of his divine awareness to surface. The forest's life energy flowed around him in visible currents, but ahead he detected an anomaly, a shadow in the natural flow, something that disrupted the harmonious patterns of living energy. There's disturbance ahead, he stated, pointing toward a particular limestone formation partially concealed by dense foliage. Life patterns become chaotic near that ridge. Goblin Slayer's helmet turned sharply toward him. Explain. Quote, realizing he'd revealed capabilities beyond normal human perception, Naruto adjusted his explanation. Birds and insects avoid that area despite suitable habitat. Suggests predator presence or unnatural conditions. The explanation, while true, obscured his actual method of detection. Goblin Slayer accepted it without further questioning, focusing instead on the tactical implications. Possible nest entrance. We approach from downwind. Observe only. No engagement unless necessary. They circled wide around the suspected area, using natural cover to approach from the least obvious direction. As they drew closer, conventional signs confirmed Naruto's supernatural detection, the distinctive acrid scent of goblin presence, crude markers warning away rival tribes, and eventually visual confirmation of sentries positioned at a narrow crevice in the limestone formation. From their concealed observation point behind a fallen oak, they studied the entrance and its defenders. 2 goblin guards stood with surprising discipline, crude spears held ready rather than casually propped aside as might be expected from typically chaotic goblin behavior. Unusual, Goblin Slayer whispered. Organized watch rotation, military positioning. Goblins don't naturally maintain this discipline. Naruto nodded, observing details beyond the obvious deployment. Their equipment is uniform, standardized weapons rather than scavenged variety. Someone's equipping them deliberately. For nearly an hour, they observed the entrance, noting patrol patterns and Road changes that suggested a surprisingly sophisticated security system for creatures typically known for impulsive and disorganized behavior. Most revealing was the arrival of a hunting party returnee. Into the nest, 6 goblins escorting 2 bound human captives, a man and woman who appeared to be travelers rather than local farmers based on their attire. The guards admitted the party after a FIC signal exchange that further confirmed the unusual organization within this tribe. Larger nest than anticipated, Goblin Slayer concluded. Possibly multiple connected chambers based on limestone formation patterns. Estimate 30 to 50 goblins minimum. Organized leadership. Recent captives for breeding and food. His voice remained mechanical despite the horrific implications. We need to see more before reporting back, Naruto suggested. This level of organization suggests either a hobgoblin leader or outside influence. The guild needs complete information before mounting a response. Goblin Slayer considered this briefly before nodding. There will be secondary entrances. Ventilation shafts. Emergency exits. We circle the formation to locate alternatives. They withdrew carefully, maintaining stealth as they began methodically examining the surrounding terrain for additional access points. Their systematic search revealed 3 smaller entrances, one disguised beneath fallen logs, another half submerged in the stream itself, and a third vertically positioned in a limestone sinkhole. Each displayed the same uncharacteristic attention to security, with concealed scent. Rise and crude but effective alarm systems involving strung pebbles that would clatter if disturbed. By mid-afternoon, they had compiled sufficient information to develop a preliminary understanding of the nest's structure and defenses. Retreating to a safe distance, they compared observations. Multiple chambers. Defensible choke points. Water access. Organized leadership. Goblin Slayer summarized clinically. Largest nest reported in this region. Too extensive for standard extermination tactics. The organization troubles me more than the size, Naruto replied, sketching a rough map in the dirt between them. These aren't random raids, they're strategic resource acquisition. The captives are being selected rather than opportunistically taken. Goblin Slayer nodded. Agreed. Goblin behavior changing across multiple nests. Similar patterns reported in northern provinces. This new information heightened Naruto's concern about his potential connection to these developments. How recently did these changes begin in other regions? 3 months. Simultaneous across reported locations. The timing confirmed Naruto's suspicions. These changes aligned precisely with his arrival in the mortal realm. Something had either followed him from the divine planes or awakened in response to his descent. Their planning was interrupted by a distant scream, human, female, and filled with terror. Both men instantly oriented toward the sound, exchanging a brief look that required no words. Despite their reconnaissance mission's parameters, neither would abandon someone in immediate danger. They moved with coordinated precision through the forest, Goblin Slayer leading based on his expertise in tracking sounds through woodland terrain. Within minutes, they located the source, a small clearing where a goblin raiding party had ambushed travelers on a rarely used forest path. The scene was chaotic: an overturned cart, a man's body lying motionless nearby, and 3 goblins dragging a struggling woman toward the forest while 2 others gathered fallen supplies. Most disturbing was the goblin commander, significantly larger than his subordinates, wearing crude but effective armor. Directing the operation with explicit gestures and harsh vocalizations. Hobgoblin leader, Goblin Slayer whispered, drawing his sword silently. Dangerous, stronger, smarter, all engage directly. You free the woman. Naruto nodded, reaching for no weapon but rather centering himself as golden energy flickered momentarily beneath his skin. On your signal. Goblin Slayer's attack came without further warning. A sudden explosive movement that brought him directly into the clearing, sword already completing its first lethal arc through the nearest goblin before the others registered the threat. The precision and economy of his movement spoke to years of specialized combat experience, each action calculated for maximum efficiency against his chosen enemy. Naruto moved simultaneously, but where Goblin Slayer's approach was direct and martial, his own seemed to defy natural law. One moment he stood at the forest's edge, the next, he appeared beside the goblins dragging the woman, his movement too rapid for mortal eyes to track. Close your eyes, He instructed the terrified woman calmly before his hand flashed upward in a precise strike that crushed the first goblin's windpipe without breaking stride. The second goblin released the woman to fumble for a crude dagger, but Naruto was already inside its guard. His palm struck the creature's chest with surgical precision, the imp act transferring focused energy rather than mere physical force. The goblin flew backward as though struck by invisible lightning, dead before touching the ground with its heart burst from internal energy. The third captor turned to flee, displaying unusual tactical awareness, but froze mid-step as it found Naruto somehow already blocking its escape route. "How creatures like you think is valuable information," Naruto murmured, placing his palm against the goblin's forehead before it could react. Golden energy briefly illuminated his hand as he extracted surface thoughts and recent memories. The goblin collapsing lifelessly afterward. Meanwhile, Goblin Slayer engaged the hobgoblin commander with methodical precision, his fighting style neither flashy nor artistic but devastatingly effective. He anticipated each attack based on intimate knowledge of goblin combat tendencies, countering with minimal movement and maximum effect. The hobgoblin, however, displayed fighting techniques beyond typical goblin capabilities, parrying effectively, using tactical footwork, and even attempting feints to create openings. Most disturbing was the unnatural purple gleam occasionally visible in its eyes when it shifted position. "Something's wrong with the leader," Naruto called out, securing the rescued woman behind a fallen log before rejoining the combat. "Its energy signature is contaminated." Goblin Slayer didn't question the unusual observation, focused entirely on the increasingly dangerous exchange. The hobgoblin had drawn a secondary weapon, a curved knife that gleamed with suspicious moisture suggesting poison. Naruto assessed the situation instantly, then executed a flanking maneuver too quick for normal perception. Appearing behind the hobgoblin, he struck precisely at a nerve cluster at the base of its skull, intending to render it unconscious for later questioning. To his surprise, the creature reacted with unnatural awareness, twisting away from the attack with speed no goblinoid should possess. More disturbing still, it snarled a phrase in an ancient language that no mortal goblin could possibly know, words from a divine tongue long forgotten in the mortal realm. *Zareth Malkuth Vekra, it hissed, eyes flaring brilliant purple. "The Devourer awakens, fallen god." The direct address shocked Naruto enough to create a momentary opening that the hobgoblin exploited, its poisoned blade slashing toward his unarmored abdomen. Only preternatural reflexes saved him from serious injury, though the blade still scored a shallow cut across his ribs. Goblin Slayer capitalized on the hobgoblin's focus on Naruto, driving his sword through a gap in the creature's armor with mechanical precision. The blade penetrated completely, emerging from the opposite side in what should have been an instantly fatal wound. Instead, the hobgoblin laughed, a sound no goblin throat should produce, and reached back to grasp Goblin Slayer's helmet with unnatural strength. Naruto's immediate intervention prevented serious injury, his open palm striking the hobgoblin's extended arm with enough focused force to shatter bone. The hobgoblin staggered but remained upright, despite injuries that should have been incapacitating. Purple energy visibly coursed through its veins now, sustaining it beyond normal biological limits. "Your choice to walk as mortal will be this realm's undoing," it snarled in the ancient tongue, addressing Naruto directly. "The void between divinity creates opportunity for those patient enough to seize it." Naruto's expression hardened as he recognized the implications. This was no ordinary hobgoblin. Something was speaking through it, using the creature as a vessel. The entity knew him, knew what he had been, and most concerning, knew what he had sacrificed to walk the mortal realm. Without further hesitation, Naruto abandoned all pretense of normal human capability. Golden energy surged visibly beneath his skin as he formed a complex pattern with his hands, channeling power into a concentrated sphere between his palms. The Rasengan, a technique he had developed during his earliest divine manifestations, compressed spiritu Al energy into rotating destructive force. "Return to whatever void spawned you," Naruto commanded, driving the spiraling sphere directly into the hobgoblin's chest. The impact released concentrated, divine energy in a controlled explosion that completely obliterated the hobgoblin's physical form while simultaneously purging the malevolent presence inhabiting it. For a brief moment, a purple mist attempted to maintain cohesion above the destroyed body before Naruto's residual energy dispersed it completely. Silence fell across the clearing as the last echoes of combat faded. Goblin Slayer stood motionless, sword still extended, helmet oriented toward Naruto with unreadable intent. "You're not a conventional adventurer," he finally stated, perhaps the most profound understatement possible given what he'd just witnessed. Naruto allowed the golden energy to recede beneath his skin, centering himself before responding. "No, but my purpose aligns with yours, protection of innocent lives against threats they cannot face alone." For a long moment, Goblin Slayer remained motionless, processing what he'd observed against his rigid worldview. Finally, he lowered his sword and gave a single nod. "Effective goblin killing methods are acceptable regardless of source," he concluded pragmatically. "Your techniques eliminate them completely. That's what matters. The simple acceptance, focused entirely on practical outcomes rather than philosophical implications," surprised a genuine laugh from Naruto. A refreshingly straightforward perspective. Their exchange was interrupted by Mauve, emerged from behind the fallen log where the rescued woman had taken shelter. She emerged cautiously, eyes wide with conflicting terror and gratitude. Are they gone?" she asked, voice trembling, as she clutched a torn cloak around her shoulders. "Yes," Goblin Slayer confirmed without elaboration, already moving to check the male victim lying near the overturned cart. Naruto approached the woman with deliberate gentleness, his earlier combat ferocity completely absent from his demeanor. "You're safe now. Are you injured?" She shook her head, though her gaze repeatedly darted to the leaf-ailess goblins and the unrecognizable remains of the hobgoblin. "My husband," she began, looking toward where Goblin Slayer knelt. "Alive," came the helmet-muffled response. "Unconscious. Head injury. Requires treatment." Relief visibly washed over the woman as she sank to her knees, the aftermath of terror and adrenaline leaving her shaking. "Thank the gods you came when you did. Those things. They said horrible things about what they planned for me." Naruto helped her to a more comfortable position against a tree trunk, offering his water skin. "What's your name?" "Alara," she replied after a grateful sip. "My husband is Marcus. We're merchants traveling to Frontier Town with textiles." She glanced at the scattered goods from their overturned cart. "Or we were. Once your husband is stabilized, we'll help secure your belongings," Naruto assured her. "For now, rest while we assess his injuries." He joined Goblin Slayer, who had already bandaged a nasty gash on the unconscious merchant's forehead. "Concussion. Possible skull fracture. Needs proper healer." Naruto nodded, placing his palm gently against the injured man's chest. With careful restraint, he channeled a minimal amount of his healing energy, not enough to raise questions about miraculous recovery, but sufficient to stabilize the most serious damage and ensure the man would survive transport. "He'll make it to town if we move carefully," Naruto confirmed. "I can fashion a stretcher from cart materials." Goblin Slayer nodded, rising to secure the perimeter while Naruto repurposed wooden slats and rope from the damaged cart. As they worked, Naruto considered the profound implications of what had occurred, the hobgoblin's unnatural abilities, its knowledge of divine language, and most concerning, its specific recognition of Naruto's true nature. The entity called itself the Devourer, Kurama noted internally. That name appears in no modern pantheon, but ancient texts mentioned a parasite that fed on divine essence during the primordial era. If such an entity has awakened, my presence may have inadvertently provided a beacon, Naruto replied mentally while continuing his external task. The council warned that my transition might create ripples in the cosmic hierarchy. More importantly, it recognized you specifically, Kurama added. Which suggests it's been watching, waiting for an opportunity. The implications were troubling. If Naruto's descent had indeed awakened or attracted this entity, he bore responsibility for whatever threat it posed to this realm. His scion to abandon godhood might have endangered the very mortals he sought to understand and protect. Within an hour, they had constructed a functional stretcher, secured the most valuable of the merchant's goods, and prepared for the journey back to town. The husband had regained partial consciousness, though remained disoriented and weak. The next investigation must be reported immediately, Goblin Slayer stated as they began their return journey, each taking an end of the stretcher while Alara carried a bundle of salvaged goods. Larger response required. Multiple experienced adventurers. Specialized equipment. Agreed. Naruto replied, mind still processing the encounter's implications. But we should also warn them that something unusual is influencing these goblins. This isn't a standard nest elimination. The helmet tilted questioningly. Explain. Naruto considered how much to reveal without raising questions about his own nature. The hobgoblin displayed abilities beyond normal evolutionary development. Some external force is accelerating their growth and organization. Unusual but not unprecedented, Goblin Slayer responded after consideration. Rare instances of Goblin shamans developing limited magical abilities exist in records. Possible natural evolution. Perhaps, Naruto allowed, though he knew better. The malevolent presence he'd sensed was no natural evolution. It was something ancient and patient that had recognized an opportunity in his transition to mortality. They traveled in practical silence thereafter, making steady progress despite their injured charge. By early evening, the town's walls came into view, their arrival quickly drawing attention as guards recognized the stretcher and wounded merchant. Word spread rapidly, bringing Aloka, healer running to assess Marcus's condition while curious townspeople gathered to learn what had happened. Guild Girl emerged from the Adventurers' Guild, her professional composure momentarily forgotten as she rushed toward them with genuine concern. You're back earlier than expected, she noted, quickly assessing the situation. Goblin ambush. Organized raiding party with hobgoblin leadership, Goblin Slayer confirmed. Nest identified. Larger than anticipated. Requires significant response force. Guild Girl's expression grew serious as she gestured them toward the guild hall. Come inside. We need details immediately. The guild's main room cleared quickly as regular patrons recognized the urgency of the situation, leaving only senior guild staff and a few experienced adventurers who might be called upon for the response. Alara remained with her husband as healers tended him in another room, while Naruto and Goblin Slayer presented their findings to an increasingly concerned audience. Goblin Slayer's report was clinically precise. Exact location details, entrance points, estimated numbers, observed patrol patterns, and tactical considerations for any assault on the nest. He mentioned the unusual organization but attributed it to hobgoblin leadership rather than supernatural influence. When Guild Girl turned expectantly to Naruto for his perspective, he added Yuli selected observations that wouldn't reveal his true nature while providing necessary warnings. The hobgoblin leader displayed combat techniques beyond typical goblin capabilities, he explained. Its equipment was superior quality, suggesting either exceptional crafting skills or outside supply sources. Most concerning was its strategic coordination of the raiding party, specific role assignments, tactical awareness, and targeted acquisition rather than opportunistic attacks. You believe something or someone is directing these goblins deliberately? Guild Girl asked, her intelligent yes, studying him with heightened interest. I believe the evidence suggests external influence beyond normal goblin evolutionary patterns, Naruto confirmed, maintaining plausible deniability while conveying essential warning. The guild fell silent as participants processed these disturbing implications. Finally, an older adventurer with a weathered face and captain's insignia spoke up. We've encountered organized goblin tribes before, but never with simultaneous regional coordination. Reports from neighboring provinces describe similar pattern changes occurring within the same timeframe. This suggests broader orchestration rather than isolated evolution. Guild Girl nodded gravely. We need to report this to headquarters immediately. This may require specialized response teams from the capital. She turned to Goblin Slayer. Would you be willing to guide such a team when they arrive? The helmet dipped in immediate affirmation. Yes, eliminating goblins is my purpose. She turned to Naruto, assessing him with newfound respect after hearing the merchant's account of his combat capabilities. And you, Mr. Uzumaki, despite your recent registration, you've demonstrated exceptional skill. Would you consider participating in the response force? Naruto nodded without hesitation, his expression resolute. I came to this region seeking purpose. If these creatures threaten innocent lives, confronting them is exactly where I belong. The meeting concluded with practical arrangements, messengers dispatched to regional headquarters, preliminary response teams organized from available local talent, and preparations for the specialized forces expected within days. As the guild emptied, Guild Girl approached Naruto privately, her professional demeanor softened by genuine curiosity. Alara described your fighting techniques as unconventional. She claimed you moved faster than her eyes could track and defeated goblins with bare hands. Naruto offered a measured smile. Different cultures develop different combat methodologies. Mine focuses on energy manipulation and precision rather than weaponry. From the far north, as your registration states. She pressed gently, her tone suggesting she recognized the deliberate vagueness of his background. Very far, he confirmed with the same cryptic response he'd given earlier, though his smile carried friendly acknowledgement of her perceptiveness. She studied him thoughtfully before responding. Well, Mr. Uzumaki, whatever your origins, your timing is fortunate. We've lost too many good people to these goblin attacks in recent months. Perhaps that's why I'm here, he replied with simple honesty that revealed more than she could possibly understand. As evening settled over the town, Naruto returned to his room at the Sleeping Dragon. His mind processing everything he'd learned. The cosmic implications troubled him deeply. If his decision to abandon godhood had inadvertently unleashed or awakened this devourer entity, the consequences could extend far beyond goblin raids. You couldn't have anticipated this outcome, Kurama offered as Naruto sat cross-legged on the floor, meditating to process the day's events. Even gods cannot foresee all consequences of their actions. Which is precisely why gods should occasionally walk among those their decisions affect, Naruto responded, opening his eyes to stare at the simple pendant that contained a portion of his relinquished divine essence. I don't regret my choice, only the unintended harm it may have caused. What will you do now? Kurama asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Naruto's expression settled into determined resolve, the same expression that had defined him across millennia of divine service. Before his self-imposed exile to mortality. Exactly what I would have done as a god, he answered simply. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Confront threats beyond mortal capability. And perhaps most importantly, he smiled faintly, learn what it truly means to be human by fighting alongside them, not for them. Outside his window, stars emerged across the darkening sky, the stars he had once moved among as an equal. Now they seemed distant and cold, yet somehow more beautiful for being viewed through mortal eyes with all their limitations and wonder. Tomorrow would be new challenges in this unfamiliar mortal existence, but for the first time in thousands of years, Naruto felt genuinely alive, connected to a world he had previously only observed from divine distance. Whatever threats emerged, whatever consequences his choices had unleashed, he would face them not as a god dispensing judgment from above, but as a companion walking alongside those who would become his friends, his allies. And perhaps even more. The thought brought a smile to his face as he finally surrendered to mortal sleep, dreams carrying him through experiences no god could ever comprehend. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Whispers of Divinity. Dawn arrived with thin fingers of mist curling between buildings, transforming farm country town into something ethereal and ancient. Naruto stood at the eastern gate watching darkness retreat across the landscape, appreciating how different sunrise appeared through mortal eyes. As a god, he had witnessed the mechanics of planetary rotatio. Billions of times, the predictable physics of celestial bodies holding no mystery. Now, each color bleeding across the horizon felt like a revelation, each shifting shadow a small miracle previously unappreciated. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice observed from behind him. Turning, Naruto found Guild Girl approaching with a leather satchel slung across her shoulder, her professional attire already impeccable despite the early hour. She joined him at the gate, her gaze following his toward the brightening eastern sky. Sometimes I forget to notice it, she admitted, when ledgers and requisition forms demand attention. But on mornings like this, she left the thought unfinished, content to share the moment of appreciation. Impermanence creates beauty, Naruto replied, the observation drawn from millennia of watching civilizations rise and fall. Things precious because they cannot last. She glanced at him with renewed curiosity. That's surprisingly philosophical for someone who fights goblins with his bare hands. Fighting rarely requires philosophy, he acknowledged with a smile. But living well demands it. Before she could respond, the distinctive sound of methodical footsteps announced Goblin Slayer's arrival. He approached with his characteristic mechanical precision, fully armored despite the early hour, additional equipment secured at his belt and a specialized pack strapped to his back. "You're here," he stated, acknowledging both without distinguishing between them. "Good." Guild Girl straightened, reverting to professional efficiency. "The advance team is prepared. 4 silver-ranked adventurers will accompany you, 2 warriors, a scout, and a mage. They await final briefing inside." Goblin Slayer nodded once. "Equipment, everything you specified," she confirmed. "Smoke pots, mirror flashers, collapsible spikes, water purifiers, and extra oil. Antidotes," he pressed. 3 varieties, as requested." The alchemist worked through the night. Another nod, this one containing the faintest suggestion of approval. He turned to Naruto. "Combat experience against organized enemies." "Extensive," Naruto replied simply, offering no elaborati. On that might raise questions about his true nature. Goblin Slayer assessed him silently before turning back toward the guild hall. "Come." Strategy briefing. Guild Girl fell into step beside Naruto as they followed. "He's accepted you faster than anyone I've seen," she observed quietly. "Usually takes weeks before he acknowledges new adventurers as anything but potential liabilities. We understand each other's priorities," Naruto explained. "Protection of the innocent isn't complicated conceptually, just in execution." Inside the guild, 4 adventurers gathered around a rough map sketched on parchment. Their equipment and bearing marking them as experienced professionals rather than ambitious novices. They looked up as Goblin Slayer entered, their expressions revealing a spectrum of responses from respect to thinly veiled discomfort. "This is our goblin expert," Guild Girl introduced unnecessarily, gesturing toward the armored figure. "And his recent partner, Naruto Uzumaki. Have reconnoitered the nest and will lead today's operation." A powerfully built woman with a greatsword strapped across her back stepped forward, her weather-beaten face marked by a scar running from temple to jaw. "Heavy warrior." She introduced herself simply, following the adventurer custom of using professional designations rather than names during initial meetings. "I've cleared 17 nests with organized leadership. What makes this one special?" "Unprecedented coordination," Goblin Slayer replied. "Multiple sentries, shift rotations, strategic resource acquisition, possible external influence." A slender man with close-cropped silver hair and multiple daggers secured to his leather armor nodded thoughtfully. "Scout. I've noticed similar pattern changes in the western ranges. Traditional baiting tactics no longer effective." The third adventurer, a broad-shouldered man whose massive tower shield rested against the wall nearby, grunted acknowledgement. "Vanguard. Lost 2C. Companions last month to a supposedly simple goblin nest that turned out to have prepared ambush points and pit traps." The final member of the team remained slightly apart, her violet robes and silver-capped staff marking her as a magic practitioner. Unlike her companions, she studied Naruto with intense scrutiny rather than focusing on Goblin Slayer's briefing. "Enchantress," she introduced herself when his gaze met hers, her voice carrying the distinctive accent of Southern academic institutions. "Specializing in barrier manipulation and elemental disruption." Naruto acknowledged each introduction with a respectful nod before Goblin Slayer commandeered attention, pointing to his detailed map of the limestone formation housing the goblin nest. 4 confirmed entrances, he explained methodically. "Main entrance here." His gauntleted finger indicated the primary opening they'd observed during reconnaissance, with 2 sentries minimum at all times. "Secondary entrances less guard, but strategically positioned for rapid response." For the next hour, he outlined a comprehensive assault plan with the precision of a military commander, addressing contingencies, retreat protocols, and specific techniques effective against goblin physiology. The silver-ranked adventurers occasionally offered suggestions based on their specialties, which Goblin Slayer either incorporated or dismissed with tactical justification rather than ego. Throughout the briefing, Naruto contributed targeted observations about the terrain and unusual behavioral patterns they'd witnessed, carefully aiming his insights as combat experience rather than supernatural awareness. The team accepted his input readily, though Enchantress continued watching him with analytical intensity that suggested she sensed something unusual about his nature. Primary objective: Eliminate all goblins, Goblin Slayer concluded. Secondary objective. Locate and extract any captives. Tertiary objective. Identify source of organizational influence. He surveyed the assembled team. Questions. Heavy warrior adjusted her sword harness. Kill count distribution. Irrelevant, Goblin Slayer replied. Only total elimination matters. Retreat signal. Vanguard asked practically. 3 short whistle blasts. Fall back to rally point marked here. Goblin Slayer indicated a clearing half a mile from the nest. Scout examined the map closely. Timeline for operation completion. Before nightfall. Goblins gain significant advantage after dark. Enchantress finally spoke, her question directed specifically at Naruto rather than Goblin Slayer. You observed the Hobgoblin leader directly. What magical capabilities did it demonstrate? The question held subtle probing quality beyond tactical concern. Naruto answered carefully, providing necessary warning without revealing too much about his encounter with the entity speaking through the Hobgoblin. Enhanced physical capabilities beyond normal Hobgoblin parameters. Possible influence over subordinates through means other than standard dominance behaviors. Resistance to normally fatal injuries. He deliberately omitted mention of the ancient Langua. GE and direct recognition of his divine nature. Elemental affinity. She pressed. Nothing I recognized as conventional elemental manipulation, Naruto replied truthfully. She nodded thoughtfully, fingers tracing arcane symbols against her robes, a gesture he recognized as a subtle magical assessment. Whatever she detected caused her eyes to widen momentarily before her professional composure reasserted itself. With final preparations complete, the team departed through the eastern gate as morning fully established itself across the landscape. Townspeople paused in their daily routines to watch the adventurers march purposefully toward the forest, their expressions revealing the complex relationship between civilian populations and those who confronted dangers beyond settlement walls. They traveled in tactical formation with Scout ranging ahead, Heavy Warrior and Vanguard flanking Enchantress whose magical capabilities required physical protection, and Goblin Slayer establishing the pace from the lead position. Naruto deliberately positioned himself as rear guard, allowing him to observe the team's dynamics while maintaining vigilance against pursuit. These mortals move with impressive coordination, Kurama observed after they'd been traveling for nearly an hour. Almost reminiscent of the old shinobi strike teams from the early ages. Silver rank isn't achieved through luck or individual prowess alone, Naruto responded mentally. They've survived because they understand complementary capabilities. You realize the magic user suspects something, Kurama noted. Her type always possessed irritating sensitivity to energy disruptions. Inevitable given our nature, Naruto acknowledged. Better to have her suspicious and alert than ignorant of potential supernatural factors. Their journey followed the same route Naruto and Goblin Slayer had established previously, though at a necessarily slower pace to accommodate the full team's movement through difficult terrain. By midday, they'd reached the stream cutting through limestone formations that marked the outer boundary of Goblin territory. Scout rejoined them from his forward position, moving with the silent grace that defined his profession. Increased activity ahead. Goblin patrols expanded since your reconnaissance. They're anticipating response to yesterday's raiding party. Goblin Slayer absorbed this information without visible reaction. Expected. Hobgoblins recognize patterns. Adjust approach vector to southeastern outcropping. Utilize streamed for concealed final approach. The team adapted smoothly, altering their route to avoid detection while maintaining offensive capability. As they drew closer to the nest, signs of goblin presence intensified, crude territorial markers, partially consumed animal remains, and distinctive tracks in softer soil sections. During a brief rest period in a sheltered gully, Enchantress approached Naruto while the others checked equipment and consulted the map. You channel energy differently, she stated without preamble, voice pitched low to avoid being overheard. It doesn't flow through conventional pathways. Naruto met her gaze steadily. Different cultures develop different methodologies. Indeed, her fingers traced another subtle arcane pattern. But divergent methodologies typically maintain consistent fundamental principles. Yours operate on entirely different foundations. Her expression remained neutral though her eyes reflected intellectual fascination rather than suspicion. I've studied 17 distant, court magical traditions across 3 continents. Yours conforms to none of them. Perhaps your studies could benefit from expanding further, Naruto suggested mildly. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps they just have. She glanced toward the others, ensuring their conversation remained private. Whatever your origins, your presence significantly improves our survival probabilities. All res. Pact your reticence while maintaining appropriate observation. Prudent approach, Naruto acknowledged with genuine respect for her balanced assessment. Their exchange was interrupted as Scout returned from another ranging circuit. His expression tighter than before. Situation changed. Goblins evacuating captives from the nest. Moving them northwest through secondary tunnels. Goblin Slayer immediately adjusted the map orientation. Unexpected. Goblins typically defend rather than abandon established nests. He traced the likely evacuation route. Captives represent resource investment. Evacuation indicates strategic withdrawal rather than territorial defense. They're being directed, Heavy Warrior concluded, fingering her greatsword's hilt. No goblin abandons a secure nest without compelling force. Change of mission parameters, Goblin Slayer decided without hesitation. Intercept evacuation column. Prioritize captive recovery. Nest clearance becomes secondary objective. The team reoriented immediately, gathering equipment and adjusting their approach vector based on Scout's intelligence. Within minutes, they were moving at accelerated pace toward the northwestern coup. Adrant where the limestone formation connected to a series of narrow ravines ideal for concealed movement. Naruto extended his senses beyond normal mortal range as they traveled, detecting the Chayati. See energy signatures of numerous goblins moving in loose formation through the landscape ahead. More concerning was a pulsing darkness interspersed among them, not individual entities but rather a kanta. Monotone influence spreading through the goblin ranks like spiritual infection. Multiple hobgoblins accompanying the evacuation, he reported, earning questioning glances regarding how he could know this beyond visual confirmation. At least 3 distinct leaders coordinating movement. Goblin Slayer accepted the intelligence without questioning its source. Unprecedented leadership concentration. Confirms external organizational influence. They reached an elevated position overlooking a narrow defile where the evacuation route would necessarily funnel through a constrained passage. Vang. UARD immediately identified optimal defensive positions while Scout vanished to establish precise enemy numbers and formation. Perfect ambush location, Heavy Warrior observed, unslinging her greatsword. They'll be compressed with limited maneuverability. Unless they anticipated this tactical response, Enchantress countered, already beginning to trace complex patterns in the air that coalesced into faintly shimmering barriers. This evacuation might be deliberately visible to draw pursuit. Goblin Slayer considered this possibility before responding. Risk acceptable given captive recovery priority. Establish overlapping fields of engagement with designated withdrawal routes. He turned to Naruto. Your assessment. The question, seeking his strategic input rather than merely a sig. Ning him a position, indicated evolving respect unusual from the singularly focused warrior. Naruto surveyed the terrain with both mortal and enhanced perception, identifying energy currents flowing through the landscape. The ravine curves beyond our visual range, he noted. Scout should verify there's no secondary force positioning for flanking maneuver. Additionally, he pointed to a seemingly innocuous limestone outcropping. That formation would provide ideal placement for Enchantress. Natural energy concentrates there, potentially amplifying barrier effectiveness. Enchantress raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his perception of magical conduits invisible to conventional observation. He's correct. That's a natural ley convergence point. Scout returned before further discussion could develop, materializing from the undergrowth with practiced stealth. 27 goblins total. 3 hobgoblins directing operations. 8 captives. 5 female, 3 male. All bound but ambulatory. Formation suggests defensive withdrawal rather than tactical retreat. Time to intercept, Goblin Slayer asked. 12 minutes at current pace. Goblin Slayer nodded once, turning to address the full team. Standard ambush configuration with modifications. Vanguard establishes blocking position at ravine entrance. Heavy Warrior intercepts leadership elements. Enchantress Maintai. NS barrier control from elevated position. Scout prioritizes captive protection and extraction. I will eliminate peripheral forces. He paused, looking at Naruto. Your role, Hobgoblin neutralization, Naruto replied without hesitation. They represent the greatest threat to captives in our force. Another nod conveyed approval of the assessment. Take positions. Engage on my signal. The team dispersed with practiced efficiency, each member moving to predetermined positions optimized for their capabilities. Naruto deliberately positioned himself on the ravine's eastern slope where overhanging vegetation provided concealment while allowing clear observation of the approaching goblin evacuation. From his vantage point, he watched the first goblin scouts enter the ravine, their D forms moving with uncharacteristic discipline as they checked for threats before signaling the main party forward. The captives came next, stumbling on exhausted legs, their expressions vacant from what Naruto recognized as shock response to extended trauma. Surrounding them marched goblin guards with crude but effective weapons held ready, their usual chaotic behaviors replaced by organized vigilance. Most concerning were the hobgoblins who followed, each nearly twice the size of regular goblins, wearing mismatched but functional armor and displaying the same disturbing purple energy signet Naruto had observed in their fallen leader. They communicated through guttural vocalizations that nonetheless contained pattern and meaning beyond primitive goblin language. They're all infected with the same entity's influence. Kurama observed. The devourer appears capable of simultaneous possession across multiple hosts. Distributed consciousness, Naruto agreed mentally. Ancient technique requiring significant power and established connection to this realm. As the evacuation column reached the optimal engagement point, Goblin Slayer's signal came, a simple metal mirror Florida's that would appear natural to untrained observers but stood out prominently to the position team. The ambush unfolded with synchronized precision. Vanguard emerged from concealment directly in the column's path, his massive tower shield creating an impenetrable barrier across the narrowest section of the ravine. Simultaneously, Heavy Warrior dropped from an elevated position, her greatsword ready completing its first devastating arc through the nearest goblin guards before her feet touched ground. From her strategic placement atop the limestone outcropping, Enchantress activated Prepare D barrier matrices that shimmer into visibility along the ravine walls, preventing escape through vertical routes and channeling the goblins toward the prepared killing zone. Scout materialized among the captives, blades flashing to sever bonds while creating defensive perimeter around the traumatized prisoners. Goblin Slayer engaged with mechanical efficiency, each movement calculated for maximum effect against multiple opponents. His intimate knowledge of goblin physiology allowing him to neutralize threats with minimal exertion. His sword found vulnerable points between crude armor plates, while his shield deflected retaliatory strikes with practiced precision. The initial attack eliminated nearly half the regular goblins within seconds, the survivors reeling from the coordinated assault's unexpected ferocity. Had they been normal goblins, panic would have ensued, creating opportunities for further advantage. Instead, they regrouped with disturbing coordination, forming defensive formations around the hobgoblin leaders who began issuing commands in their guttural language. Naruto observed this response with growing concern before executing his own entrance into the conflict. Unlike his companion's conventional attacks, his approach defied normal physical limitations. One moment he remained concealed on the ravine slope, the next, he stood directly behind the rearmost hobgoblin. Moving faster than mortal perception could track. Your master reveals its influence through your coordination, he stated calmly, palm striking the creature's spine with precision that transmitted focused energy rather than mere physical force. The hobgoblin convulsed as golden energy briefly illuminated its nervous system, disrupting the purple contamination that had granted it enhanced capabilities. It collapsed without sound, the possessing influence dispelled from its form. The remaining hobgoblins immediately oriented toward Naruto, their eyes flaring with unnatural purple luminescence. Zareth Vekra Malkuth. One snarled in the ancient divine tongue, abandoning pretense of normal goblin communication. The fallen walks among lessers, thinking himself hidden from greater sight. Your perception remains flawed, Naruto replied in the same language, allowing golden energy to manifest visibly beneath his skin. As does your understanding of why I walk this path. The hobgoblin's face contorted with expressions no goblin physiognomy evolved to display, a glimpse of the entity manipulating the physical form. Divinity wasted on protection of insects. Power squandered through misguided compassion. Compassion requires greater strength than consumption, Naruto countered, hands forming a complex pattern that condensed energy between his palms. A lesson your kind never comprehended. The hobgoblin launched itself forward with supernatural speed, clawed hands extended toward Naruto's throat in attack that would have decapitated a normal human. Instead, it encountered only afterimage as Naruto sidestepped with fluid grace, his prepared energy sphere, a Rasengan variant modified for spiritual disruption, driving into the creature's side. Unlike the previous encounter's destructive application, this technique focused on severing the connection between possessing entity and physical host. The hobgoblin's body convulsed as purple energy was forcibly extracted, coalescing into momentarily visible mist before Naruto's concentrated divine essence disrupted its cohesion. The remaining hobgoblin recognized immediate threat, abandoning tactical coordination to prioritize Naruto's elimination. It reached toward a fallen goblin, purple energy extending from its fingers to animate the corpse in grotesque violation of natural order. Two more fallen goblins jerked upright under similar influence, their movements puppet-like as the possessing entity extended its control. Necromantic animation, Enchantress called from her position, immediately redirecting barrier configurations to contain this unexpected development. The hobgoblin displays prohibited third circle manipulations. The revelation confirmed what Naruto already knew: this was no natural goblin evolution but rather direct supernatural intervention from an entity with significant power. The animated corpses lurched forward with unnatural vigor while the hobgoblin began a guttural incantation that caused purple energy to coalesce around its form. Naruto assessed the situation in milliseconds, recognizing the incantation as ancient ritual that would channel destructive energy through the ravine. If completed, it would endanger not only their team but the captive scout was currently evacuating toward safety. Without hesitation, he abandoned all pretense of conventional capability, golden energy surging visibly as he executed a space-time manipulation technique developed during his earliest divine manifestations. Space compressed around him momentarily before he reappeared. Directly before the chanting hobgoblin, palm already striking its chest with precisely calibrated force. "Return to formless void," he commanded, divine authority resonating through his voice as Go. Elden energy counteracted the purple contamination. The hobgoblin's physical form couldn't withstand the concentrated purification, disintegrating as the possessing entity was forcibly expelled. Unlike previous encounters, Naruto maintained control over the escaping purple essence, containing it within a golden energy sphere for closer examination. "Consumption comes regardless, the trapped entity hissed, its voice echoing directly within Naruto's consciousness rather than through physical sound. "Your choice merely accelerates the inevitable." "Nothing is inevitable while will remains," Naruto countered, compressing the sphere until the entity's manifestation dispersed completely, though he sensed its consciousness retreating rather than being destroyed. The animated corpses coalesced instantly with their controlling influence removed, returning to appropriate stillness. Sudden silence fell across the ravine as the surviving team members processed what they'd witnessed: combat capabilities exceeding normal human parameters and energy manipulation beyond conventional magical understanding. Goblin Slayer, having methodically eliminated the remaining standard goblins during Naruto's confrontation with the leadership elements, stood amid fallen enemies with his bloodied sword still extended. His helmet oriented toward Naruto with unreadable intent before he finally spoke. "Effective," he stated simply, prioritizing results over methodology. "All goblins eliminated." The pragmatic assessment broke the moment's tension, allowing the team to refocus on mission objectives rather than Naruto's displayed capabilities. Scout had successfully extracted all captives to a protected position outside the ravine, while Vanguard and Heavy Warrior confirmed no survivors among the goblin forces. Only Enchantress maintained focused attention on Naruto, her expression combining professional fascination with cautious reassessment. She approached carefully, maintaining respect distance while magical energy gathered subtly around her fingers, prepared defensively but not aggressively deployed. "That wasn't conventional magic," she stated rather than asked, voice pitched or his ears alone while the others attended to captives and confirmed their victory perimeter. "No," Naruto acknowledged, seeing no benefit in obvious denial after such clear demonstration. "Nor was it divine channeling as practiced by temple adepts," she continued, systematically eliminating categories. The energy signatures are entirely distinct from documented taxonomies. Naruto smiled slightly. Perhaps your taxonomies remain incomplete. Evidently, she studied him with renewed intensity. Whatever your nature, you opposed that entity decisively. Its necromantic signatures carried consumption patterns of only encountered in forbidden texts describing ancient conflicts. The devourer, Naruto provided, deciding limited information served better than none against this emerging threat. An entity that feeds on energy others generate, particularly divine essence. Her eyes widened slightly at the confirmation. The purple hunger from First Era Chronicles. Scholars dismissed those accounts as metaphorical rather than historical. She glanced toward the space where the hobgoblin had disintegrated. If such an entity has returned, standard magical countermeasures would prove insufficient. A problem for another discussion, Naruto suggested as Goblin Slayer approached them, having completed his methodical confirmation that every goblin lay truly dead. Captives secure, he reported. Injuries extensive but non-fatal. Require immediate medical attention. He paused, helmet oriented toward Naruto. Your methods, unusual but conclusive. Acceptable for goblin elimination. The simplistic evaluation of complex metaphysical confrontation is merely acceptable for goblin elimination, nearly startled a laugh from Naruto despite the situation's seriousness. The CNGLE-minded focus that defined Goblin Slayer provided refreshing counterpoint to cosmic implications. Appreciated, Naruto replied with genuine respect for the straightforward assessment. With immediate threats neutralized, they regrouped with the rescued captives, 8 villagers from outlying settlements who had been abducted during raids over previous weeks. Their physical conditions ranged from malnourished to severely injured, while their psychological states reflected the trauma of extended captivity among creatures known for particular cruelty toward prisoners. One young woman, perhaps 17, remained unresponsive despite physical stimuli, her vacant gaze fixed on middle distance while silent tears tracked continuously down her dirt-streaked face. Naruto approached her carefully, recognizing severe shock response that transcended conventional trauma. Her mind has retreated to protect itself, he explained to Scout who had been unsuccessfully attempting to coax response. The pathway back requires gentle guidance rather than insistence. Kneeling before the traumatized girl, Naruto placed his palm gently against her forehead, channeling minute amounts of his healing energy, not enough to appear miraculous to observers, but sufficient to soothe neural pathways damaged by psychological trauma. You're safe now, he stated with quiet certainty, allowing warmth to infuse his voice. Your body carried you through darkness, but sunshine awaits your return. The simple words, delivered with subtle divine harmonics that bypassed conscious resistance, penetrated the protective dissociation. The girl's vacant expression flickered momentarily before her pupils contracted properly, focusing on Naruto's face with dawning awareness. They're gone, she whispered, voice raspy from disuse or screaming. Yes, Naruto confirmed, maintaining gentle contact. They cannot hurt you or anyone else again. The confirmation breached remaining defensive barriers, allowing emotional release as she collapsed forward against his chest, sobs racking her thin frame. Naruto supported her without hesitation, providing physical anchor while her psyche began processing what she had previously needed to compartmentalize for survival. Goblin Slayer observed this interaction with unreadable silence before turning away to organize transportation for the captives. His body language conveyed neither approval nor disapproval of Naruto's approach, merely acknowledgement of different methodology achieving necessary objective. Heavy Warrior approached as Naruto continued supporting the sobbing girl. Her earlier battlefield ferocity replaced by compassionate understanding. She needs sustained care beyond immediate rescue, she observed quietly. The temple in Fire Town maintains healing sanctuaries for survivors of goblin captivity. Specialized treatment exists, Naruto asked, genuine surprise coloring his tone. The institutional response to trauma victims represent adaptive civilization development he hadn't observed during previous divine overview of this realm. Heavy Warrior nodded grimly. Necessary development given increased goblin activity across provinces. The Sword Maiden established the first sanctuary after her own experience with goblin captivity. The name registered with particular significance. Sword Maiden, former adventurer who survived goblin capture as a young woman. Heavy Warrior explained. now serves as Archbishop in Watertown's Central Cathedral. Her sanctuaries have saved hundreds who might otherwise never recover from their experiences. This information resonated deeply with Naruto's fundamental purpose, protection extending beyond physical rescue to encompass healing and restoration. That a former victim had created a systemic response to trauma rather than surrendering to it spoke to remarkable resilience he found genuinely admirable. Their conversation ended as Goblin Slayer returned with improvised stretchers, constructed from goblin shields and salvaged clothing. Transportation prepared. Captives require immediate departure. Town healers await our return. With careful coordination, they secured the TRA, humatized survivors and began their journey back toward Farm Country Town. The girl Naruto had helped insisted on walking supported by his arm rather than being carried, each step representing reclamation. Ion of agency the goblins had stripped from her. "My name is Lily," she told him as they traveled, her voice strengthening with each passing mile. "From Hillside Village 3 days northeast. They too okayed me during a night raid while I was checking our sheep pen." "Naruto," he replied simply, supporting her weight when uneven terrain challenged her weakened legs. "I'm glad we found you in time." She shuddered, briefly closing her eyes. "Others weren't so fortunate. There were 12 of us initially. The ones who resisted or tried escaping, they..." Her voice faltered before determination reasserted itself. "I need to tell what happened. For those who can't speak anymore. Your survival honors their memory," Naruto assured her. "And your testimony will help protect others." As they continued toward town, Enchantress fell into step beside them, her analytical gaze alternating between professional assessment and genuine concern for the recovering girl. "The trauma response therapy you applied," she noted quietly enough that only Naruto could hear. "That technique resembles ancient celestial harmony methodology long thought lost to modern practitioners. Different cultures preserve different knowledge," Naruto replied with the same measured ambiguity he'd maintained previously. Indeed, she studied him with renewed speculation. Just as different beings manifest different capabilities. Further conversation was interrupted as Scout returned from his forward position with unexpected news. "Approaching group from the North Road. Appears to be additional adventurers." Goblin Slayer paused, considering this information unexpected. Guild reinforcements were directed to eastern approach. The team adjusted formation protectively around the rescued captives while maintaining forward progress. Within minutes, the approaching group became visible, 5 figures traveling with the distinctive readiness that marked experienced adventurers rather than ordinary travelers. Most immediately noticeable was their diversity. A tall warrior in elaborate silver-chased armor walked alongside a diminutive priestess in white and red ceremonial robes. Behind them followed a vile-looking young man with a staff and scroll case whose animated gestures suggested enthusiastic conversation with his reserved companion, a taciturn dwarf carrying an enchanted battle axe. Leading he group with confident strides was a slender female figure whose pointed ears and distinctive green-gold hair immediately identified her elven heritage. Reinforcements from regional headquarters. Heavy warrior identified with evident relief. High-ranked mixed specialization team. The approaching adventurers noticed them simultaneously, the lead elf raising her hand in formal greeting before quickening her pace to close the distance. As she drew nearer, Naruto observed her more carefully. Exceptional quality bow and quiver suggesting archery specialization, multiple silver and gold tokens, indicating high rank within the adventurer hierarchy, and most notably, eyes that reflected centuries of experience despite her youthful appearance. "Well met, travelers," she called in musical voice, that carried clearly despite moderate distance. "We seek Goblin Slayer and recent goblin activity reports." Goblin Slayer stepped forward, helmet dipping in minimal acknowledgement. "I am Goblin Slayer." The elf's eyes widened slightly before narrowing with practiced assessment. "So you're the famous specialist. I expected someone taller." Despite the seemingly dismissive words, her tone conveyed professional respect rather than genuine criticism. "Height irrelevant to goblin killing efficiency," Goblin Slayer replied matter-of-factly. A smile flickered across the elf's face before she noticed the rescued captives behind him. Her expression immediately shifted to focused concern. "You've recovered survivors. They need immediate attention. Returning to town currently," Goblin Slayer confirmed. Neutralized evacuation column. 27 goblins eliminated including 3 hobgoblin leaders. The elf's companions joined her, the silver-armored warrior stepping forward with formal bow. "I am Spearman, leader of this regional response unit. We've been dispatched to investigate reports of coordinated goblin activity across multiple provinces." "Confirmation found," Goblin Slayer stated, gesturing toward the captives. These survivors witnessed organizational behaviors inconsistent with normal goblin development patterns. The priestess moved immediately toward the injured, her hands already glowing with healing magic as she assessed their conditions. "These poor souls have endured terrible suffering," she murmured, her gentle voice carrying unexpected authority. Injuries appear ritualistic rather than random cruelty." This observation drew immediate attention from both teams. Ritual behavior represented significant deviation from known goblin patterns, suggesting purpose beyond mere sadism. "Explain," Goblin Slayer requested, his tone containing unusual urgency. The priestess gestured toward specific markings visible on several captives' exposed skin. "These patterns are deliberate, systematically placed at energy meridian junctions. They're consistent with ancient blood ritual practices designed to harvest life essence." Naruto exchanged meaningful glances with Enchantress, both recognizing the implications simultaneously. The Devourer wasn't merely possessing goblin leaders, it was teaching them sophisticated essence extraction techniques to feed its consumption requirements. "The situation is worse than reported," Naruto stated, drawing attention from the newly arrived team who hadn't yet registered his presence beyond being part of Goblin Slayer's group. The elf turned toward him fully, her ancient eyes narrowing with immediate intensity as she studied him with unexpected recognition. For a heartbeat, her composure faltered or centuries of discipline reasserted control over her expression. "You're not from around here," she stated with absolute certainty despite having no conventional means of knowing this. "Few of us are," Naruto replied carefully, recognizing something beyond ordinary perception in her assessment. "Adventurers typically originate elsewhere before finding their calling." "Indeed," her tone stead layers of meaning beyond the simple acknowledgement. "I am High Elf Archer, formerly of the Eastern Forest Enclaves. My companions and I have tracked unusual goblin migration patterns across 3 provinces before regional headquarters directed us to coordinate with local specialists." Introductions completed between the two teams, they combined forces to expedite return to Farm Country Town, placing captive protection as highest priority. As they traveled, the various specialists exchanged information and observations about recent goblin behavioral changes, building comprehensive understanding of the emerging threat. Naruto found himself walking alongside High Elf Archer, whose occasional sidelong glances suggested continuing assessment beyond conventional observation. After ensuring sufficient distance from others to prevent eavesdropping, she finally addressed him directly in ancient Elven dialect that had disappeared from common usage centuries earlier. "The trees whisper of your passage," she stated in the archaic tongue, "though they cannot name what walks among them." Naruto maintained neutral expression despite surprise at her knowledge of language that predated current civilizations. "Trees often recognize what eyes cannot see, he replied in the same dialect, confirming his understanding while neither confirming nor denying her implicit question about his nature. Her eyes widened fractionally before narrowing with renewed speculation. 3 months ago, ancient wards carved into the world tree began glowing for the first time in 15 centuries. The elders claimed a significant shift in divine equilibrium had occurred. She studied him with centuries-old wisdom belying her youthful appearance. Now I encounter someone whose energy patterns resonate with harmonics lost since the divine concord. Coincidences often appear meaningful to those seeking patterns, Naruto observed noncommittally. Elves do not believe in coincidence, she countered. Nor do we ignore warnings from patterns established since first creation. Before Naruto could respond, Lily stumbled beside him, momentarily overcome by exhaustion despite her determination. He immediately refocused on supporting her, effectively ending the probing conversation with High Elf Archer while maintaining plausible deniability regarding her suspicions. The combined parties reached Farm Country Town shortly before sunset, their arrival drawing immediate attention as townsfolk recognized rescued neighbors and family members among the captives. Word spread rapidly, bringing healers running to assist while Guild Girl emerged from the adventurers, guild with organized efficiency that belied her evident relief at their successful return. 8 survivors recovered, She confirmed as Goblin Slayer reported mission outcomes. That's more than we dared hope for. The families had begun funeral preparations after so many weeks without word. Specialized care required, Goblin Slayer responded. Beyond standard healing. Psychological trauma significant. Guild Girl nodded with understanding that suggested unfortunately frequent experience with similar situations. We've prepared the temple annex with specialized healers from the regional sanctuary. They arrived this morning after receiving our request. As the captives were transferred to medical care, the adventurers regrouped in the guild hall to debrief and share critical intelligence. The room cleared of regular patrons, providing privacy for sensitive discussion about implications of their findings. Ritualistic markings on captives confirm suspicions of external influence. Spearman began, unrolling a regional map across the main table. Similar patterns have been documented in 3 other provinces within the past 2 months. Always accompanying organizational changes in goblin behavior. The ritual designs appear corrupted from ancient purification wards, the priestess added, SK. Etching symbols on parchment for comparison. Inverted and modified to extract rather than cleanse life essence. High Elf Archer leaned forward, tapping specific locations on the map. Goblin migration patterns have shifted dramatically. Previously random wandering has transformed into deliberate movement along old power lines established during the First Era. Ley lines, Enchantress confirmed. Tracing corresponding patterns across the map. The limestone formations housing the nest we investigated sit directly atop a major confluence point. The implications built with each shared observation, creating disturbing composite picture of coordinated supernatural influence rather than natural evolutionary development. Throughout the discussion, Naruto contributed targeted observations while carefully avoiding revelations that might expose his true nature or direct connection to recent events. The entity controlling the hobgoblins identified itself as the Devourer. During our confrontation, he eventually stated. Deciding limited information served better than none against the emerging threat. It displayed capabilities consistent with ancient consumption-based entities documented in various historical records. This revelation drew immediate reaction from High Elf Archer, whose ancient eyes reflected recognition beyond academic knowledge. The Devourer is no mere historical footnote, she stated with uncharacteristic gravity. Elven histories record its manifestation during the First Sundering when divine barriers between realms weakened following the Celestial War. The Purple Hunger, Enchantress added, drawing connection to her earlier identification. Forbidden texts describe an entity that fed upon divine essence spilled during primordial conflicts. Guild Girl, who had been documenting the discussion with remarkable composure despite its apocalyptic implications, looked up from her notes. Are you suggesting these goblin changes represent preliminary stages of some larger manifestation event? Evidence supports the hypothesis, Goblin Slayer stated with typical directness. Goblins serve as vessels and collection mechanisms rather than primary threat. But why now? Spearman questioned. What catalyst triggered this entity's return after centuries of dormancy? All eyes unconsciously turned toward Naruto, though none could articulate rational explanation for their collective intuition. He met their gazes steadily, offering careful response that provided necessary warning without revealing his direct connection. Ancient entities often exploit transitions or disruptions in established order, he explained. Recent celestial phenomena, referencing the falling star, witnesses had reported, might represent sufficient disturbance to weaken barriers maintaining separation between realms. The explanation, while technically accurate, redirected attention from himself toward broader cosmic processes. Most accepted this framework for understanding recent events, though High Elf Archer's penetrating gaze suggested continued suspicion about his specific role. As evening progressed, the discussion shifted toward practical strategies rather than theoretical origins. Guild Girl coordinated with regional headquarters to establish monitoring systems for goblin movement patterns, while Goblin Slayer outlined specialized tactical approaches for confronting supernaturally enhanced goblin nests. Standard protocols insufficient, he concluded after methodically identifying weaknesses in conventional approaches. Require adaptations for neutralizing ritual sites and possessed leadership elements. The regional temple can provide purification artifacts, the priestess offered. Though limited in supply, they disrupt T-essence extraction rituals effectively. Elven enclaves maintain ancient wards specifically designed against consumption entities, High Elf Archer added, though her tone suggested obtaining such artifacts would prove challenging given elven isolation tendencies. Throughout these practical discussions, Naruto observed with growing appreciation for how effectively these mortals adapted to extraordinary threats despite limited understanding of cosmic forces involved. Their resourcefulness and determination represented exactly why he had chosen mortality, to experience firsthand the remarkable resilience that defined human consciousness when confronting forces beyond conventional comprehension. As the meeting concluded with established action plans and communication protocols, Guild Girl approached Naruto privately while others gathered equipment and prepared for evening meal. "The survivors have been asking for you," she informed him, professional demeanor softened by genuine appreciation. "Especially the girl, Lily. The healers say your interaction with her prevented complete psychological withdrawal." "I merely provided momentary stability," Naruto demurred. "The true healing comes from within her own resilience." Quote. Guild Girl studied him thoughtfully. "For someone so capable in combat, you demonstrate unusual understanding of trauma recovery. Most adventurers focus exclusively on the rescue without considering aftermath. Protection extends beyond physical intervention," Naruto replied, the principle fundamental to his divine domain before relinquishment. True healing requires addressing both visible and invisible wounds. Her expression reflected surprised appreciation for the philosophical depth. The temple healers expressed similar sentiment. "They've invited you to visit the recovery ward when convenient." Naruto nodded acceptance of the invitation. "I'll attend them shortly." As Guild Girl departed to manage administrative documentation of their mission outcomes, Naruto found himself approached by the unlikely pairing of Enchantress and High Elf Archer, both women studying him with intellectual intensity that transcended mere curiosity. "We need to talk privately," High Elf Archer stated without preamble, her tone brooking no argument despite being pitched to avoid attracting attention from others. "About matters beyond conventional understanding," Enchantress added with meaningful emphasis. Naruto recognized the inevitable confrontation regarding his nature, having expected such challenges eventually from those with sufficient sensitivity to detect anomalies in his energy patterns. Rather than immediate denial or evasion, he nodded acceptance of their request. "The Eastern Watchtower provides both privacy and perspective," he suggested. "After I've visited the recovery ward." Both women accepted this reasonable delay, though their expressions suggested determination to obtain answers rather than continued deflection. As Ey separated to attend individual responsibilities, Kurama's voice resonated within Naruto's consciousness. "Your divine disguise unravels faster than anticipated," the nine-tailed entity observed dryly. "The elf especially possesses troublesome perceptiveness. Transparency with select individuals may prove beneficial rather than problematic," Naruto replied mentally while navigating toward the temple annex where recovered captives received treatment. "Complete secrecy limits potential alliances against genuine threats. Just remember that knowledge of divinity often changes mortal behavior fundamentally," Kurama cautioned. "The companions you seek to make may transform into worshippers or enemies depending on their nature. Then I'll discover their true nature through their response," Naruto concluded as he reached the temple entrance. A worthy test of potential friendship. The recovery ward occupied the temple's southern wing, a peaceful space designed specifically for psychological healing rather than merely physical recovery. Soft lighting from enchanted crystals provided illumination without harsh shadows, while subtle aromatics from healing herbs created calming atmosphere conducive to restoration. The head healer, a middle-aged woman whose gentle demeanor belied the steel in her spine, greeted Naruto with respectful acknowledgement. "The survivors have spoken highly of your intervention," she informed him, leading him through the ward. "Particularly your approach to Lily's condition. Few adventurers recognize psychological protective mechanisms when encountering them. Experience teaches recognition patterns," Naruto replied modestly. "Indeed, she studied him with professional assessment. You've worked with trauma victims before." "In various capacities," he acknowledged without elaboration. She accepted his reticence without pressing further, instead guiding him toward a small garden courtyard where several recovering captives sat beneath flowering trees. Among them, Lily spotted him immediately, her face brightening with recognition as she waved him toward the stone bench beside her. "You came," she greeted, her voice stronger Han during their journey though exhaustion still shadowed her eyes. "I wanted to thank you properly. The healers say if you hadn't guided me back when you did, I might have remained lost within myself. Your own strength brought you back," Naruto corrected gently, taking the offered seat. "I merely provided momentary direction." She shook her head with surprising determination. "I felt what you did. There was warmth, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds." Her fingers unconsciously traced the healing ritual markings on her forearm. "The darkness tried consuming everything, but light pushed it back long enough for me to find myself again." The description, while metaphorical from her perspective, accurately reflected the subtle divine essence he had channeled during their interaction. That she perceived it so clearly suggested unusual sensitivity to spiritual energies, possibly enhanced by prolonged exposure to the devourer's corrupting influence during captivity. Amatime's darkness makes us forget our inner light exists," Naruto replied, choosing words that acknowledged her experience without confirming supernatural intervention. "Remembering it remains our most powerful defense." "The healers say similar things," Lily noted with small smile, "though they use more complicated theological terminology." They spoke for nearly an hour, her initial gratitude evolving into more generalized conversation that represented important steps in psychological recovery, reclaiming normal interaction patterns after traumatic disruption. Throughout their exchange, Naruto noted her remarkable resilience despite experiences that permanently damaged many survivors. "Will you stay in the region?" she eventually asked as evening shadows lengthened across the courtyard. The healers mentioned specialized teams forming to address these goblin changes. "For the immediate future," Naruto confirmed. "There are questions requiring answers before I continue my journey." She nodded understanding. "If your path brings you near Hillside Village once I've returned home, please visit. My family would welcome the person who brought their daughter back to them, in body and spirit." The simple invitation, representing normal human connection untainted by awareness of his divine nature, touched Naruto deeply. This was precisely the experience he had sacrificed godhood to obtain. Genuine relationship based on shared experience rather than worship or supplication. "I would enjoy that," he replied with sincere appreciation. After concluding his visit with appropriate farewells to both patients and healers, Naruto made his way toward the eastern watchtower where High Elf Archer and Enchantress awaited his arrival. The stone structure rose 3 stories above surrounding buildings, providing panoramic views across farm country town and the surrounding landscape while ensuring privacy for their impending conversation. Both women stood at the tower's upper platform, their expressions revealing differing approaches to the coming exchange. High Elf Archer's ancient eyes reflecting determined intensity while Enchantress maintained scholarly detachment masking genuine curiosity. They turned simultaneously as Naruto emerged from the stairwell, the evening breeze carrying their words away from potential eavesdroppers below. "You're not human," High Elf Archer stated without preamble, centuries of experience having eliminated patience for social niceties when addressing fundamental truths. "Nor elemental, or conventional divine messenger. Your energy patterns defy established thaumaturgical classification systems," Enchantress added more academically, "yet demonstrate conceptual resonance with primordial creation harmonics documented in first-era theoretical frameworks." Naruto approached the tower's edge, gazing across the landscape bathed in sunset hues before responding. Below, townspeople moved through evening routines, shopkeepers closing businesses, farmers returning from fields, children being called indoors for supper, all unaware of cosmic forces converging around their simple community. "What do you believe I am?" he finally asked, neither confirming nor denying their assertions. High Elf Archer moved beside him, her profile regal in the fading light. 3 months ago, elven astronomers observed a divine transit unlike any recorded in our histories. Not a messenger descending with purpose and returning to celestial realms, but rather a permanent transition, a star falling without reascension. Simultaneously, arcane harmonic patterns shifted across all documented ley networks, Enchantress continued, completing their shared observation. Theoretical thaumaturgists documented fundamental realignment of divine material interface boundaries, as though cosmic hierarchies had experienced spontaneous reconfiguration. Interesting astronomical phenomena, Naruto acknowledged neutrally. Stop deflecting. High Elf AR. Cher stated with sudden sharpness born from centuries observing diplomatic evasions. The world tree doesn't resonate with ordinary beings. Ancient wards don't activate for coincidental energy pattern similarities. And goblin hobgoblins don't spontaneously develop capacity for speaking primordial creation language. Her directness deserved equivalent honesty, Naruto decided. Maintaining complete secrecy served no purpose if potential allies possessed information crucial to understanding the emerging threat. While full revelation remained premature, acknowledgement of their perceptions offered middle ground between denial and complete disclosure. Your observations contain accuracy, he conceded carefully. Though interpretations may vary from reality in significant aspects. Then enlighten us, Enchantress requested. Her scholarly curiosity evident despite maintained professional distance. What interpretation accurately explains your anomalous existence and apparent connection to recent events? Naruto considered his response carefully before answering. I walk a path few have chosen, transition rather than visitation. My current form represents deliberate choice rather than inherent limitation or disguise. You abandoned divinity, High Elf Archer translated bluntly, centuries of experience allowing her to grasp implications immediately. Voluntarily relinquished godhood to walk mortal paths. Simplified but essentially correct, Naruto acknowledged, seeing no benefit in continued deflection given their evident understanding. Though, abandoned, suggests rejection rather than transformation. I chose connection over separation, experience over observation. Enchantress's eyes widened with profound realization. The cosmic reconfiguration wasn't random disruption, it was voluntary divine divestiture. You created metaphysical vacuum by relinquishing established position within cosmic hierarchy, which potentially created opportunity for entities previously contained by established boundaries. High Elf Archer concluded grimly, including consumption-based predators like the Devourer. Naruto nodded, appreciating their immediate grasp of implications without requiring extensive explanation. The transition created ripples I didn't fully anticipate. Cosmic hierarchies resist reconfiguration through natural conservation principles. The void left by my choice potentially created access point for opportunistic entities previously unable to breach established barriers. So the goblin transformations, the ritual modifications, the coordinated activate wise, all represent this devourer entity exploiting disruption you inadvertently created, Enchantress summarized, her tone reflecting intellectual assessment rather than accusation. Essentially correct, Naruto confirmed. Though my arrival may have provided catalyst rather than direct causation, the entity likely existed in dormant state awaiting opportunity rather than being created by my actions. High Elf Archer's expression hardened with millennial wisdom that had witnessed countless conflicts between cosmic forces. Regardless of specific causation, connection exists between your arrival and these developments. The question becomes, what responsibility will you assume for addressing consequences? The directness deserved equivalent honesty. Complete responsibility, Naruto stated without hesitation. Protection remains my fundamental nature regardless of form. If my choices endangered this realm, addressing resulting threats becomes my primary purpose. His unhesitating acts, PTANCE of responsibility visibly surprised both women, who had clearly anticipated defensive justification rather than immediate acknowledgement. The response revealed more about his true nature than extended explanations could have provided. You were a protective deity, Enchantress deduced, magical sensitivity allowing her to perceive resonant harmonics in his energy patterns. Your divine doma, encompassed guardianship rather than destruction, creation, or natural forces. Protective but also renewal, High Elf Archer added with unexpected gentleness, ancient eyes studying him with new understanding. The energy you channeled during Hobgoblin confrontation carried distinctive restoration signatures alongside purification elements. Naruto acknowledged their accurate assessments with slight nod. My domain encompassed protection, perseverance, and renewal, principles I maintained despite formal divestiture from divine hierarchy. Which explains your approach to the traumatized survivors. Enchantress noted thoughtfully. You instinctively addressed spiritual damage alongside physical injury. Why choose mortality? High Elf Archer asked directly, the question containing genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Few beings willingly relinquish power, fewer still divine status. The fundamental question deserved honest response. Perspective. Naruto explained simply. Eternity of observation without participation creates distance that corrupts purpose. I watched countless generations live, struggle, suffer, triumph, and die, experiencing everything through divine detachment rather than genuine connection. He gazed across the darkening landscape, mortal settlements illuminated by lamplight representing everything he had sacrificed divinity to experience. To ECT effectively requires understanding what makes existence precious to those you guard. Mortality, with its limitations and impermanence, creates meaning divinity cannot comprehend through mere observation. His explanation resonated visibly with High Elf Archer, whose millennia-long lifespan had created similar, if lesser, detachment from shorter-lived races. The burden of watching countless immortal generations pass while remaining essentially unchanged, she acknowledged with unexpected vulnerability. Even elven longevity creates distance that complicates genuine connection. What remains of your divine capabilities? Enchantress inquired with practical focus that balanced the philosophical exchange. The confrontation demonstrated significant power retention despite apparent mortality. Limited but substantial reserves, Naruto admitted. Complete divestiture proved impossible without cosmic destabilization. I retain approximately 20% of former capabilities, primarily healing, purification, and protective aspects most aligned with my essential nature. Sufficient for confronting consumption entities like the Devourer. High Elf Archer pressed. Uncertain, Naruto replied honestly. The entity's current manifestation represents preliminary infiltration rather than complete emergence. Its capabilities remain partially obscured until fuller materialization occurs. Enchantress processed this information with scholarly precision, which explains its distributed consciousness approach through multiple hobgoblin vessels rather than direct manifestation. It's establishing network access points throughout the region while gathering sufficient energy for complete materialization. Using goblin raids and ritual extraction to harvest life essence, High Elf Archer concluded grimly. Building toward critical mass that would support direct physical manifestation. The pattern suggests preparation stages rather than immediate threat, Naruto confirmed. Though acceleration appears likely given entity awareness of my presence and potential opposition. All three fell silent, contemplating implications as night fully claimed the landscape below. Stars emerged across the darkening sky, the same stars Naruto had once moved among as an equal, now observed from mortal perspective with all its limitations and wonder. What happens now? Enchantress finally asked, her question encompassing both immediate tactical concerns and broader metaphysical implications. Now we prepare appropriate response, Naruto replied simply. Beginning with informati, on sharing among those capable of comprehending the threat without creating wider panic. Goblin Slayer should be informed, High Elf Archer stated decisively. Despite his singular focus, his tactical expertise against these vessels proves invaluable. Agreed, Naruto nodded. Though information must be presented within framework he can integrate into existing mission parameters. The Regio Null Temple hierarchy should receive modified briefing as well, Enchantress added. Their purification protocols offer practical countermeasures against essence extraction rituals without requiring complete metaphysical disclosure. Their discussion continued well into evening, establishing communication protocols and information compartmentalization strategies appropriate for various stakeholders. Throughout the exchange, Naruto noted how quickly both women adapted to confirmed existence of divine entities without succumbing to either religious or skeptical rejection, intellectual flexibility that reaffirmed his decision to trust them with partial truth. As their council concluded near midnight, High Elf Archer addressed him with formal dignity that acknowledged his true nature while maintaining relationship as equals rather than worshipper to deity. Your choice to walk mortal paths deserves respect, she stated, ancient eyes reflecting starlight. Few beings of any nature possess courage to abandon established identity for uncertain growth. Knowledge brings responsibility, Enchantress added with scholarly precision. We will maintain appropriate discretion regarding your nature while providing necessary support against emerging threats. Naruto acknowledged their commitments with genuine appreciation. Thank you for understanding without expecting worship. True companionship requires equality rather than supplication. As they descended the watchtower to return to their respective accommodations, Naruto reflected on unexpected developments his choice had in it. IATED, both problematic emergence of ancient threats and potentially valuable alliances with remarkable individuals. Despite complications, the experience reinforced his fundamental decision to abandon divine detachment for mortal connection. Within his consciousness, Kurama observed these developments with characteristic dry assessment. You've acquired unusual companions remarkably quickly for someone who abandoned a mortal existence less than a season ago. Quality matters more than timeframe, Naruto replied mentally as they reached the street below. Their perceptiveness and adaptability demonstrate exactly why this realm deserves protection, and why you chose to experience it directly rather than merely observing from divine distance, Kurama acknowledged with unexpected insight. Though challenges appear correspondingly greater than anticipated. The best journeys rarely follow expected paths, Naruto responded as they separated from their companions with appropriate farewells. Discovery requires embracing uncertainty rather than following predetermined routes. As he returned to his modest room at the Sleeping Dragon Inn, Naruto surveyed the simple accommodations with genuine appreciation for experiences divine existence could never provide. The comfort of physical rest after exertion, satisfaction of hunger fulfilled, and most significantly, connections forming with individuals who saw him as companion rather than remote deity demanding worship. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in addressing the emerging threat, but tonight represented successful navigation of first significant hurdle in his chosen path, finding individuals who could accept his true nature without fundamental relationship distortion. That both women had responded with intellect. Curiosity and practical partnership rather than religious awe suggested potential for genuine friendship previously unavailable to him as distant god. The thought brought unexpected contentment as he surrendered to mortal sleep, dreams carrying him through experiences no deity could comprehend from divine distance. For all complications his transition had inadvertently created, moments like He's confirmed the fundamental wisdom of his choice, connection over separation, experience over observation, growth over stagnation. Even gods could learn from mortality's precious impermanence. Chapter 2 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.